So we are now going to move into the presentation about the vision. I'm going to speak again just to show it's a different thing. I'm going to walk over there and do it. So I will be doing this session with Alexander Hasgall, the head of the CDE. He'll be coming up and joining me in a panel discussion, come question and answer. But at the beginning, I'm going to take you through the elements of the vision and how we came about to be doing this exercise. The paper itself is called Building the Foundations of Research, because we do believe that that's what the doctorate is. It really does underpin all research, more or less, that takes place in university and other settings. Beginning with the idea that we're revisiting our foundations as the CDE, this organisation began with the Bologna process in the early 2000s, which structured and restructured higher education in Europe. The specific discussion relative to doctoral education was embodied in a declaration and a list of points which have come to be known as the Salzburg Principles, because that's where they did them. There are quite a few of these, but the core ones can be summed up with what's on this slide, that a doctorate should have at its centre original research. Nonetheless, they foresaw that there would be a widening of career paths open to doctoral graduates, which we have certainly witnessed in the intervening years, and that institutions should be providing structures and support for the doctorate. At that time, this was a relatively new idea. It was largely resting in the individual supervisor model. These principles are not something that we're seeking to change in this vision, but we do recognise that the world itself has changed, and therefore it was a good time, especially after the disruption of the pandemic, to renew that vision and think about what might be on the horizon for our activity. The process by which this vision came about wasn't something that took place in isolation. It's in a way a sum of the lessons of the activities of the CDE in recent years, which many of you have also taken part in, the workshops, the annual meetings, the thematic peer groups. It also relates to the wider thinking of the EUA. Amanda mentioned the EUA's foresight exercise, Universities Without Walls, which set a context for the vision. We focused on the specifics of doctoral education. The work we did within the CDE of surveying the community, our first survey in 2017, which I think is the largest survey of doctoral education ever done in Europe, was foundational. This was updated with the exercise in 2021, the report of which is available to you out there in the foyer. Within the steering committee, we reflected quite long and hard about these issues, and then we decided that the best way forward was to convene a focus group of members. About 70 were involved from 24 countries, and this was organised in a foresight structure to think about the future. We then produced a draft vision paper that has done the rounds of the EUA Council and some member organisations for comments, and we now have arrived at a final document which will be available to you at this meeting. So that's where it's all come from. let me move on now to the more important topic of what's in it. Before the focus group, we asked those who were going to take part which issues were most on their mind, what did they think were the key drivers which are likely to shape the structure and content of doctoral education. This was the result, slightly but not hugely surprising, but I think what we were seeing were definitely the external environment coming in and doing this shaping. Right at the top were concerns about employability in a precarious labour market. So where do our graduates go? How do we prepare them for where they're going to go? Even more broadly, the global pressing issue of sustainability and climate change was rated very highly as a driver. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I do want to pull out the third one because it is a recurring theme, the issue of funding. Funding of doctoral education and funding of the people who undertake it. You'll be seeing the other drivers as I proceed into the vision, because we were strongly influenced by this as we structured both the workshop and the eventual report. What we found were that the key points emerging from these activities broadly fell into two categories. There were extrinsic drivers coming from changes in the world which impinged upon doctoral education, and there were intrinsic ones, changes in what we do, the way we organise ourselves to deliver that doctoral education. And you can see the two lists there. Now, they're not fully separable. I'm sure somebody's going to point this out, that they interact with each other at an individual and at a collective level. But it did help us to structure our thinking to work in that way. In terms of what we did with them, when you see the report, you will see that the typical structure is to take that driver, to characterise the issues that it presents to us in a positive way with the opportunities created. Hence, on these slides, you'll see it in green, and then the challenges and threats. So we've used the traditional warning colour of amber to represent those. We then go on to propose a way forward, and that sums up as the principles of that vision. These are presented in blue. So when you're looking at the slide, you'll see at least the shorter version of that statement of the vision under that particular heading. So let's move into what's there. You'd not be surprised to see digitalization as a key driver for what we're trying to deal with. Digitalization is certainly transforming both research and doctoral education. Taking the education side first, of course, we are now much more digital in how we manage the whole process. Some of you are people who run those processes, and you will know that digital transformation is going on and will continue to go on. When we come to the candidates themselves, it's probably quite difficult to undertake a doctorate nowadays without some element of digital skills. And I make that statement not as someone who's got my mind set only on science and engineering, but increasingly it's a part of social science and humanities as well. That is illustrated by the fact that so many doctoral researchers nowadays are dependent upon digital infrastructures to pursue their research. I think all of these things can justifiably be in the green print as positives, but digital also brings its challenges. As we discovered during the pandemic, it is possible to work entirely in a digital space, but we're now trying to rebalance and decide what the right combination is of a digital approach and the sort of personal interactive approach. And there is no doubt that there are some kinds of field work, for example, that were impossible to carry out digitally. Another problem of digital is that it requires investment and resources. Not everyone has equal access to those, so the point of the digital divide is also present in the doctoral world, and this was evident in our focus group. The last point to make about this is that there is a downside to digital working, and there was some evidence put to us of individuals experiencing social isolation because they were not integrated in the same way, particularly people who are starting their doctoral careers. Something which is probably true for all candidates is that they were inhibited in their ability to build networks. Those of us with established careers could draw upon our existing networks and probably keep them going with full strength through digital contact. If you're trying to build a new one, it's much more difficult if you lose those small conversations in the corner of a conference or something. So we ended up with the statement that you see in blue and black at the bottom. Essentially, that is saying that digital frameworks are a core element of doctoral schools. Second one, Sustainable Development Goals. The UN's Sustainable Development Goals have effectively become a shared international framework for the sustainable and equitable development of the planet. The second point is important because they're not only about protecting the environment, they're also about social development. Nonetheless, greening is a major issue in the world of doctoral education, as it is in almost every other activity, as is engagement with the global south. We did have a little bit of pushback in our consultation on this proposition. I mean, nobody, not in our world anyway, is against greening, but there were some who were concerned that an excessive focus upon thematic approaches might be a risk to the freedom of research to pursue what is most important about the content of that research. Nonetheless, we have recommended that the SDGs should provide a holistic framework in which we support doctoral education. The third point is quite related to the one that went before, the exchange with society. How much should carrying out a doctorate involve interaction with the wider community, particularly outside the academic world? What we concluded were that doctoral candidates are often the bridge builders. They themselves are the people who are the moving parts when we collaborate with industrial partners, with public organisations or non-governmental organisations. We've seen a quite considerable growth of collaborative doctorates, but even outside those formal structures, they are often carrying out their own interactions in the course of their research. And that is an essential part of the way they co-create the knowledge in the doctorate. So that's the positive and something that we wanted to reinforce in the vision. We did also recognise that there could be cautions here, that when you expose research, you also expose yourself to those who may have negative views against what you are doing. Our concern was that early career researchers might be more vulnerable to societal pushback, to the kind of people who would attack the principles of what they are doing, perhaps in social media, perhaps directly in public fora. And therefore we must be mindful of that and provide them with the right support and frameworks to be able to put their ideas forward. Equality, diversity and inclusion, very, very familiar words to most in the university world. And the positive statement, even though there's only 1 out of 3, is a very strong one, because diversity is not only something that we ought to be doing, it's something that makes what we're doing better. And as doctoral education has grown, it's increased the opportunity to have a more diverse set of people doing it, and therefore bringing more diverse and varied values and ideas into the creation of knowledge. Nonetheless, we don't have perfect numbers. Access to doctoral education from underrepresented groups does remain a problem. I mean, at the top level, more or less, if you look across Europe, we have achieved gender balance in doctoral education. But that does not hold up if you drill down into individual subjects. They can be quite skewed in one direction or another. And we might ask ourselves whether that's happening for good reasons or not. There are other groups that find it even more difficult to get into doctoral education because of their initial socioeconomic backgrounds, and I see that we have this as a topic which is going to come in more detail during this annual meeting. Many candidates have to struggle with their personal situations to do a doctorate. The long duration is itself a deterrent to those who might be financially challenged, who have caring responsibilities, and who are put off by the prospect of precarious employment ahead of them. We want to be sure that doctoral education should be open to all of those who might benefit from it and allay those fears. So the statement here is a strong statement in favour of having diverse backgrounds in doctoral education, understanding that is a route to excellence, but also saying that we must be mindful of the challenges that those in the mix might be facing, and make sure that they do really have equal opportunities and that doctoral education is fully inclusive. Academic freedom. It seems strange to even have to put this up as something in a declaration, but it did appear from our workshop and our surveys that in some parts even of Europe, academic freedom is something which is not an absolute given and guaranteed. The steering committee was certainly of the view that academic freedom is something ultimately that is essential for high quality research. If you don't have that freedom, you start biasing your results, and that bias means that they are worse results. It is inferior research to that which might otherwise have been done. Now, there's a closely linked theme here of institutional autonomy. So that's academic freedom on a collective rather than an individual basis, but that is saying that it should ultimately be up to universities to determine how they deliver doctoral education and how they guarantee that freedom for candidates themselves. Threats to freedom sometimes can be very obvious. I won't name the countries, but I think you can all think of somewhere that is taking place. But they may also be less overt. They might be through trying to tilt the funding system towards particular topics and away from others. They might come from pressures put upon candidates and supervisors. And clearly, the less powerful you are in the academic system, the harder it is to resist those pressures. So we have made a statement, of course, in support of that freedom, but also to say that it should be a live topic. There should be an active dialogue going on, and it is our job in the framework we provide to create the forum in which those critical views can be expressed. We're moving now into the intrinsic part of the list, the right-hand side of that earlier slide. So this is more about how we organise ourselves as a community and in our institutions. One of the observations in the vision is that doctorates nowadays quite often have an adjective in front of them. So we have professional doctorates, we have industrial doctorates, and so on. That is fine. I think we welcome in the vision the idea that there should be a diverse taxonomy of doctorates to meet those needs, as long as we are adhering to the core principles of what a doctorate is, and it's not a relabeling of a lower degree education. Structured approaches have now become predominant. They're not carried out everywhere according to the survey, but let's say roughly 2/3 of our membership are reporting that they have quite well established structures for doctoral colleges, doctoral schools, and a means of delivery of doctoral education. Again, it's not our job to be prescriptive, but we do note that this is a trend. We had a specific annual meeting on this topic when we were in Malta, or was it a workshop? Anyway, we had a meeting on it. Along with the structured approaches is a professionalisation of approach. There is now a much more specialised professional group to whom many of you here belong. The existence of that group encourages universities to deliver the kind of prominent and systematic attention that doctoral education deserves. Now, there are still some rough edges to this, and one of the rough edges we noted is that the kind of support structure that exists for doctoral candidates is less likely to exist for postdocs. We had a discussion today in our steering committee about this, and one thing became clear: there wasn't even a full agreement on what is a postdoc. There are many different forms of research employment you can undertake in a university setting after a doctorate, and they're different between countries, different between disciplines. And watch this space. I believe the CDE will be following up on this particular topic. But we did want to make a statement in this format section of our vision, that we should also be mindful of that part of an academic career. Assessment, quality assurance. It's not a topic that it's easy to get excited about, but it's clearly very important. What we did note is that a variety of mechanisms exist. These may come from outside, from authorities who impose them upon universities, or possibly from funders, or they may be internal to the universities. It's not the aim of the vision to endorse one approach or another. What we were trying to say is that we should not lose sight of the ultimate goal of assuring quality of research, rather than making sure that a particular tool is applied. Quality lies in much more than having your administrative processes right, important though that may be, and we need to ensure that these processes are recognising the value of research and of the key complementary activities that go with it, such as research ethics and integrity. This point also extends to research assessment. This is an area where a lot of work is going on at the moment in the wider EUA, but it is clearly very important to doctoral candidates who are encountering the values and methods of research assessment as they complete their work. One of the concerns we have is the transition to open science. In many, if not all countries, publications are an important part of the way either we assess the doctorate itself or we assess the candidate just after they have achieved their doctorate. Now, as we change the publication system away from the previous journal-based, journal hierarchy-based approach, we need to be mindful that it has to be replaced with something that gives very clear messages to the candidate about what they should and should not be doing, and make sure that they are properly prepared for any assessment they may face. I mean, my personal view on this is that senior academics are very happy to subscribe to the principles of open science, but less happy to really move away from the way they judge people. I mean, it's, you say open science is absolutely what we must have, and then you say this person's got 2 Nature papers and something in Cell or something like this, and they're immediately top of your list. It's a bit like joining Alcoholics Anonymous and then having discussions about fine wines, somehow. Okay. Nearly finished. Skills is very important. It's a truism to say that skills should be fit for purpose. What we wanted to embody in the vision is that skills don't only come from transferable skills training, important as that is, but they are inherent to the process of doing a doctorate. And the skills you learn from actually doing the research are not always fully codified, and we need to do more about being clear that this is what people with a doctorate have to offer. It's important for their future careers, but important for also understanding how we structure their experience. The problem is you can think of so many things that a candidate needs to know. I mentioned it in the introduction. It's part of the time issue. We have to be sensitive to the fact there is only so much that you can pack into that doctoral experience, and there may well be consequences for the well-being of the candidate if we overdo that. So balance needs to be sought. Supervision, of course, is a core activity. The main recognition of difference in the vision from the earlier days, perhaps the Salzburg days, is that this has become far more a team activity. The single supervisor model still persists. The last survey seemed to imply that it was about half and half in terms of prevalence. But somehow, even if there is a single supervisor model, delivering a doctorate is now fundamentally a partnership between supervisor, supervisee, and the environment which is embodied in the arrangements, the doctoral school, or whatever context that university is offering. On the caution side of supervision, as you would expect, transparency was something to be stressed, anticipation of future conflicts by being as clear as possible in advance as to what the rules of the game are. Again, these may vary in subjects. In my previous role, I had to arbitrate at one point between subjects on the one hand where it was absolutely the norm to co-publish with the supervisor, and it would be seen almost as a failure not to do so, and at the other end of the spectrum, subjects where that would be seen fundamentally as research misconduct and appropriation of the candidate's knowledge. These things need to be clear in advance, otherwise you can get some unhappy situations. Last point, last but certainly not least, and if you remember it was high up on the initial list put to us, funding is adequate to achieve a successful outcome. It's not really possible to achieve a doctorate without some means of support, and indeed for the institution to be properly supported to deliver it. Having said that, it was very evident in the focus group that there was a big difference in the means and level of funding across Europe, and also that financial worries are one of the main drivers of stress and even of mental health problems among candidates. We felt it was not our role to say how long a doctorate should ask. We wouldn't have needed the title of this meeting if it was our role to do that. But what we did want to emphasize is that a frequent situation emerges where there is a mismatch between the duration of a grant or other funding arrangement for a candidate and the time that they actually need to do the doctorate. I mean, in my personal experience, that often resulted in the fact that somebody had run out of support at the very time they were writing up their work. So instead of focusing on that absolutely crucial phase, they were worrying about supporting themselves or even their families, if that was relevant. So at least this alignment was important. We made a slightly softer statement about what the level of funding should be, and that is that the reference point should be early career knowledge workers in general. It's not a statement as to whether it should be a stipend, a grant, or a salary. That's a national issue. But we will start to lose good candidates unless the level of support is at some level competitive with what you can get as a new graduate doing other subjects. So that takes us through what's in the report. You'll see that there are further points behind what I've been saying. I've been largely skimming across the top of some of them, but we do think we have a statement about foundations, but this is a living document, and we want it to belong to this community, to evolve and change. Alex, would you like to join me now? And we'll move into discussion mode and start that living process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe first, before we go to the question, and I would also do this on a personal level, but I think also from every colleague here, really thank you, Luke, and also the whole steering committee for your work you had. I had the honor to be part of it, and that senior university leaders are engaged in discussion. This happens, but that they really spend time to work on a text, to discuss with colleagues, to exchange. This is really something great. So thank you very much for that. And also thank you to our members. We had, for instance, the focus group this January, and what we have seen in the pandemic, that often when you do an event, maybe 50% showed up and people leave after 1 hour, and we had a whole day event, and the ones who were there, I see a couple of them, nearly everybody showed up, everybody stayed the whole day, and it really shows that we are here in a situation where we all have a passion to look what's going on, we all identify a lot of changes going on, and we really hope that this vision paper is a vision. It's not a cookbook, it's not kind of a roadmap, a specific roadmap. It's really a common vision of doctoral education where rectors' conference, where universities, where members, where discussion in meetings and a special steering committee came together and worked on this. And this is our document. When you leave, you will get them freshly in your hands. So you will have it fresh from the press, and really this is something which will lead us, but also something which hopefully will be discussed by all of us and you, and discussion starts now. So we would be happy if we could already get your feedbacks or questions or remarks and get on the discussion before we go after discuss it during our reception. So please, the floor is now yours. Yes.
Hello, my name is Mikaela Hasgall. I'm professor at the University of Tromsø, or actually Arctic University of Norway. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm very impressed that you managed to provide us with such a very concrete vision across all Europe, because I know how hard it can be to align with this high diversity of training opportunities that our PhD candidates have. And I also wanted to highlight the point that you mentioned on co-authorship. As when we have looked into previous surveys, we see that that turns out to be the main kind of disagreement or unclear agreements when it comes to co-authorship is one of the main reasons for PhD students ending up on sick leave. So now I didn't see all the report, but my question is kind of, did you provide any advice of how this could be handled? Because we have now become very strict. When they provide their plan, they have to already have a plan on who is going to contribute to each paper. Thank you.
Well, thank you also for your kind remarks. Well, we're operating at a certain level of generality, as you implied, but the advice which is embodied in the vision is to make things clear at the beginning, as you said you are doing, so that people understand what the rules are and are not surprised when you get to the point where authorship becomes an issue. You know.
David?
Thanks very much. It's David Bogle, University College London. Thanks very much for a really great presentation. It's a great vision. My comment was, as it points out several places, you know, we're creating these researchers for a wide range of careers, and significant things have changed over the last 20 years in doctoral education, but I have a feeling that a lot of employers are not yet recognizing that. And I wonder to what extent you think we, the UA, all of us have a role in promulgating this vision, well, not even just the vision for the future, but the current position to employers to try and encourage them to be, not more open, that's the wrong word, but to recognize the wider range of skills that doctoral candidates get to this stage. And just to what should we all be doing about it?
Perhaps it's a question for the EUA.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing with such a document, you can then look, what do we say, and then I can, but quoting yourself, it's always a bit weird. So, no, but yes, there is so concretely, when we have this recommendation about skills for purpose, there is this sentence saying doctoral candidates must be able to map, visualize and verbalize their skills and communicate these capabilities to others. Now, this doesn't mean that we say, okay, that's now your business and we are not involved. Therefore, in other parts we talk about partnership and collaborations. And as you know, a lot of the work we are doing are connected to this. But one concrete element in this vision is that what we may call kind of a communicative turn in doctoral education, where communication is becoming not only an element of PR, but also an element of self-understanding, so the ability to understand what the doctorate can bring. So when the vision also talks about the contribution of the doctorate is training doctoral candidates to do the research, even if it's not always evident what the concrete impact is. All to explain what this means and to explain the capacities of the doctorate, this is certainly one of the main tasks we are still confronted with, and we can learn a lot from each other. And this is how we wanted to reflect this also in this vision as one important aspect.
The only point I would add to that is that this is another area where there are national differences, and I think Germany in particular, there's a very clear understanding that the doctorate is a qualification for a very wide range of activities. Yeah. So we should maybe try to understand how that situation has been achieved. I'm looking at my German steering committee colleague right in front of me, if he wants to offer a view on that. Hans? Why does Germany accept more than other countries that the doctorate qualifies you for a wide range of careers? Yeah.
Microphone.
I think that's just kind of a tradition, and a tradition which is also residing in the very conservative German engineering. So this is also a question of hierarchy, and a doctorate represents to some extent one level higher. And that's why something which has been established. But I would like to mention also something concerning this communication. I completely agree that this is important, but I don't think that it has that level of relevance, because I have heard over the years so many industrial leaders that whatever you do at the university, they tell you that you are not doing the relevant things. So I remember at the beginning of this Bologna thing, company leaders in Germany were very aggressively saying, why are you so conservative? Why don't you go on this European train? Everyone else does. Our graduates are far too old, blah, 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 blah. And 10 years later, they asked us, why did you do this stupid European thing? These are not, the people you produce are not mature. We want to have 5 or 6 years graduates. And these situations happen that frequently, so I don't think that you can convince really anyone. It's important, the communication, but I don't think that we will be successful in convincing industry leaders that the doctorate had a value. Some believe it for a specific profile of jobs, others don't believe it, but maybe I'm too pessimistic.
Maybe just to add to this, because this leads us to a discussion which is becoming increasingly also dominant, or not increasingly, it's for a long time, about skill gaps, for instance, or skills mismatch. And when you look at this document, I don't think we ever use the word skills mismatch, also based on the idea that, first of all, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and secondly, because it's maybe simply not true. So what is here to say is a lot of the skills in the doctorate can lead, gives you experiences which are not evident at that time. If you, and we will talk tomorrow about the future plans and our workshop about greening, one big challenge and one really in the essence of this document is the foundation of research. saying research can lead to many ways, give much more competences that you may think when you talk about research. Now, a document or probably any kind of communication can only work if the other person is really also listening. And what we can see, there are always people to listen. It's maybe not enough, but if you find somebody who listens to you, who wants to go into exchange, then you need to know what to say. So this vision here is a vision. It's not, again, a manual how to, for instance, interact, how to collaborate, how to do things, but maybe more to say how you feel being in the area of doctoral education, how you envision maybe a more ideal world, and how do you get there by identifying actually your strengths and possible ways to go. If you are alone in this way and people don't join you at the end, it may be difficult, but I don't think we are in this situation. We see it here with how many people are here, and with the fact that the world is changing, a lot of challenges, and doctoral candidates are important for them.
Thank you. I'm Jane Wellens from the University of Nottingham, and I'd like to express my thanks to the steering committee and Luke for the work that's been done on the vision. I think it's a really helpful document, and I was very pleased to see it looked like pandemic only mentioned once in it, but I think it's a really great starting point to help us take forward those challenges that have emerged since the turn of the 21st century in the doctorate. I did note, though, and it perhaps speaks to the previous point, that under 7.7, I think it was, which was the quality of the doctorate, it talked about the quality of the research and not the researcher, and I wondered whether that had been a discussion that you'd had, because it does feel like we're talking much more about the researcher as the outcome of the candidature rather than the research per se.
You were leading on this thing.
Okay. When we look at this point, and when we start in the steering committee, there was a discussion about quality assurance. It was very much based on experiences a lot of the colleagues also shared, and what also the last survey, the ARDE survey on quality assurance, which many of you are aware of, showed. There is a lot of assessment in doctoral education. It starts from external evaluations, where the schools, you have this internal formative evaluation. Doctoral candidates are evaluated on their publications, despite, we hope this change now to a certain degree with reform of research assessment. And the main kind of point here was really to say, just asking for more and more quality assurance can be counterproductive, because it can make things more difficult without really helping. And if we say the foundation of doctoral education is the research, and if we say we need to find a fit-for-purpose approach to all of this, then of course this fit-for-purpose approach is looking into, for instance, supervision, is looking into the different processes you have. But it was here more just to remind, and this may be also a little bit, maybe this vision paper, for what is it used? You can use it to learn yourself, but of course you can also use it to argue in certain situations. And what we have heard from a lot of colleagues is arguing also sometimes for more flexibility when it comes to quality assurance is sometimes helpful, when you can on one hand say we need a fit for purpose, and we need to take the focus, which is the foundation of research, into the way how we assess quality. So therefore, this quite strong statement about research and quality assurance is made. But when you look from the whole chapter and the whole document, it's not about saying, oh no, let's go back, forget the doctoral candidate, but it was more saying, really take care to not make this research, this quality assurance system a red tape experience or including more and more regulations, but understand good research just work if you have researchers who have the capacities, who have the skills training, who have an outlook for the future and knowing they get a good employment. And then you get research, and you as quality assurance system need to understand that this is our orientation, and you should not have a function which makes it more difficult to reach this. I hope this could a little bit address this.
If I can add that, I think there is a good point there, that we put a great deal of effort into evaluating the product of their research, but much less into evaluating the personal qualities and attributes that they have acquired during the doctorate. And I suppose we apply the same criteria that we do in general employment decisions. Yeah.
Hello. University Polytechnic of Bucharest. I like the way in which you presented the things, from Salzburg principles to vision for the future, and how the things really have evaluated during these days. I like to underline a question also concerning the assessment. I think the assessment is a core of all the doctoral process, all the doctoral studies. And sometimes it is a misunderstanding between the assessment of the doctoral training programs and the assessment of the doctoral research. Maybe I would like to see more focused or more putting this problem of research assessment in the new light of the new research reform assessment in Europe. Because the last document launched by the European Commission in November just underlined very clearly that we just need a reform in research assessment. And this is important also for doctoral education. Maybe this can be a good guideline, as it was one of the former Salzburg principles before for the universities in Europe. So this new research assessment based on more qualitatively indicators than quantitatively, as we are doing in the present. I know that it is very hard and will be very hard for the universities, really, because as Luke said before, it is very difficult. We are very open to open science, but not so open when we are dealing with assessment of research. So maybe in this vision, this much more focus, this much more intensively saying about the new research reform assessment, meaning to pass to a new qualitatively indicators than quantitatively, which are in the present. Thank you.
Yes. So first of all, thank you very much. And of course, we could talk now a lot about what's happening in the area of research assessment. Maybe the first point is doctoral education must be, and this is also in this document, be a voice in a lot of development which are happening at the moment. And happily, we have somebody who is really involved in all this development, which is my colleague Stefan Berchmans, who is the director actually in EUA for Research in Innovation. And maybe, Stefan, sorry if we put you on the spot, I don't know if you have some lights on him, so he will be, but at least you get the microphone. Maybe you could share 2-3 words about what's going on and how you think a doctoral education community can be a real voice in this process.
Yeah, of course, pleasure. Thanks a lot. So thanks a lot, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think this is a very important topic. So you're right. In November, the Commission came out with a document, okay, and it was really well welcomed by the community. What has happened since then is that the Commission is facilitating actually the reform. We started a process back in January. We're working with Science Europe, the funders, and EUA in a drafting team to draft an agreement on the reform of research assessment. We're working with a core group of more than 20 organizations actually representing the community, and there's now a stakeholder assembly of more than 300 organizations, including universities and an association of universities, who are part of the process and have expressed their interest to be part of the process. We're finalizing the agreement. The agreement is about 10 commitments that universities and other organizations will sign, actually, in agreeing to reform. And then the journey will start. So what I would do is urge all of you to make sure that doctoral education, that doctorate and doctoral schools are well represented. And I would urge you to contact your leadership in your university to make sure that they are aware of this reform that is going to start. So you can go on the Commission's website about this. Please come and find me afterwards. I can point you to first express your interest in being part of the process, but then it will be time afterwards to sign the document and join a coalition that will be constituted later this year that will be driving, and this is going to be bottom up, not the Commission driving it, it will be the community driving actually the reform of research assessment. So again, I'm urging you, please be part of this so that you can ensure that the doctorate is well represented in there, in addition to just universities. Okay? So thank you very much for that time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful vision. And my name is Sanja Bachun, and I'm Dean of Postgraduate Research Education at the University of Essex. Now, one thing that struck me in the vision, and I'm really pleased about it, is the mention of equality, diversity, and a prominent and very strong statement you have placed there. My question is, does the vision go a step further to envision universities that would monitor underrepresentation, to envision universities that would act on what they monitor? I mean, we understand that underrepresentation comes in many guises. These could be disciplinary, but they could be also country or culture specific. Does the vision go a step further, and would the organization itself want to go a step further in this direction? So beyond just saying that we need a more diverse doctoral body force and more doctoral education. So that's a question. Thank you.
I'll answer that. I mean, the vision says what you saw, but I don't think you can make progress without monitoring it. How could you possibly do that? So at the level of the individual institution, I think it's really important to get a deep understanding and probably dig a little bit deeper than the broad categories that we sometimes use. Yeah.
Maybe just to add for your question, when you ask what we are doing, this is really a living document, and this is a good question. We know, for instance, when it comes to monitoring diversity, you have very different national contexts, even different laws to do it. So, but we also know that you do different experience, different ways in different contexts. So this is maybe, and I think also the other questions about research and quality assurance, a lot of this question may not be 100% solved in this, because this was actually my biggest fear. We present this and everybody applauds and said, beautiful vision, I want the Prosecco. And this is, you still can say that, but at least you didn't say it immediately. But yes, it's a living document. So how can we really, I mean, we will have a discussion, for instance, on Friday more about first generation doctoral candidates, and we have experts here. We have experts on quality assurance. We have experts on skills training. So probably one of the steps will really be to bring this vision, to bring our expertise, and in the next 1-2 years, in different parallel sessions, on different panels, get 2 concrete examples, how people relate here to such a vision, how they also update it, how maybe some experience show us next time things need to be differently mentioned, and this kind of monitoring approach, I think it's really a good example how you can work with this kind of vision to make it living. The last question, then we...
Thank you very much. My name is Przemysław Broszkowski. I'm the president of the PhD Student Union at the University of Warsaw. Thank you for the document, but this is actually my response to your call, not to just share how pleased we are, but I wanted to share one thought that I had when I listened to the key takeaways from the document, because there's a thing that it is present throughout the document, but it's not expressed straightforward, and I wanted to share it. Because the modern development of science is extending or actually breaking the barriers of the disciplines, correct? And solving the interdisciplinary problems. As you, for example, showed, one of the key takeaways of the documents is the green transformation, and this is also in the disciplinary subject. And I wanted to actually say that I'm very grateful that it appeared in the document, throughout the whole document, not expressed as a single thought, but throughout the document, the interdisciplinary research. Like, for example, when you've mentioned the change of the supervision, correct? There was also a possibility of creation interdisciplinary research or supervision teams, right? And the doctoral student, doctoral candidate can be a part of this team. So I think that what needs to be said with respect to the doctoral education for the future is also it's the interdisciplinary angle. And I think this is especially important to the University of Warsaw. We have created, and to share the experience, we have created an interdisciplinary doctoral school dealing with that issues. So, and my colleague here is actually representing the school. So yeah, thank you for that, and I think this is also very important with respect to this being a living document, that we see how it works in the next few months, years to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to come back and disagree with you. I believe that the future of research does lie in interdisciplinarity. That's certainly what we're doing in this university, and increasingly we see projects which span all of our faculties, from sort of medical to science and engineering to humanities and social science and business. And we genuinely have initiatives that involve all of those working together. Now that's clearly going to have implications for those doing doctorates within the context of that research. Yeah.
Okay, one last...
Hello, my name's Hannah from the University of Manchester. It's quite a quick question. I'm sure that everyone is relieved by that. I started my PhD candidature as a part-time self-funded student, and I'm particularly interested in students' experiences relating to that. I'm wondering how much consideration, or even what sort of processes were put in place during the creation of the document to sort of take into consideration the needs and experiences of part-time and indeed self-funded students, just out of interest.
Yes. Yeah, so, yes, this is, as you know, we will discuss in this event part-time doctorates, and of course, when we wrote this document where this was discussed, this was also a consideration. So very concretely, you will find this in several contexts when it comes to funding, when it comes to specific needs. So, of course, we have 10 points, so we couldn't, even if we could 10 other issues add, we could also add a chapter on research integrity, or add a chapter on these specificities. But when we look into the focus on diversity, when we look into the focus of diversity of backgrounds, when we talk about flexibility to a certain degree, then this addresses different groups of doctoral candidates, not only part-time but also part-time. And again, this is now exactly the moment to discuss. So how can we use the different points here and update them in order to address very concretely about part-time doctorates, for instance. And this is exactly what we will hopefully do tomorrow. So it's a good message, but maybe, I don't know if you want to add something, Luke, otherwise we...
Yeah, no, I just agree with what you said. I think tangentially we are discussing it, many of the points around the stresses of funding and additional responsibilities very much have that kind of community in mind. Yeah.
Okay, so before maybe Luke can say the last 2-3 words to finish the day, I go to very practical announcement now. So the first practical announcement, and I was told I should change my voice for that, so it gets more authoritative. I took a coffee cup into this room, and I was wrong. I admit it. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, because I was told this is really bad. And the caterer is really unhappy about, let's say, me, but he doesn't know me, so please don't tell him it was me. I know there are also some other people. So please don't bring your cups down and don't bring them up next time. It seems that it hurts him somehow. And it's also, as you know, it's also a bit, of course, it's actually not allowed to be here, and I don't know if we should break the rules. Here in Manchester, we don't, so please bring the cup down. Now, another thing, we have an app, as you know, and hopefully a lot of you have downloaded. I was just going a bit through the app, and one of opportunities, of course, to have additional networking event. I just saw that they open an event for early stage researchers from Hannah Ruth McCarthy, who put invitation tomorrow. So if you are early stage researchers and want to meet your peer, go into the event app and there is a suggestion for meetings there. And if you have other ideas like meetings, if you have documents you want to share, if you have a conference you feel everybody who is here should be aware of, or if you have lost something, there is also a lost and found section, everything, or even if you need a ride to the airport, because this could be more difficult as we may think, there is also a ride section. So please use the app, maybe not when we are talking, because otherwise we feel you are not taking attention, but otherwise use all of this to work. Now the last announcement is that we would like to invite you to the welcome reception. It will be in the main hall of the building, the Drum. I don't know, you can tell us why they call it Drum, on the ground floor. Tomorrow morning, 9:15, please be in time. We will have a welcome address of the president of this university here in the same room. And with that, thank you so much for being part of this day, and see you tomorrow or later.
Do you have a proper copy of a report?